Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're talking about 10 things that I want in Spider-Man 2 plus my villain predictions at the very end of this video. 5 of these things are story-related things, and 5 of these things are just general game-related things. But before we get into it, if you guys are new in here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss any time I upload a video or go live. But without wasting more time, let's get into it. So the first thing I want is a Kraven the Last Hunt storyline. So if you guys don't know Kraven Last Hunt, it's basically where Spider-Man dies and we could play a chunk of the game as Miles. But in this storyline, Peter and MJ are married and then Spider-Man comes back from the dead. This will make Kraven the main villain of the game for a large portion of the game, but we can also still have Venom as the main villain. There's a big rumor going around that this game is going to take place 5 years after the first one and like 5 years after Spider-Man Miles Morales, which I think that's a cool idea, honestly, especially if we're doing this Kraven the Last Hunt storyline, because this storyline really relies on Peter and MJ being married. And also, if Spider-Man is dead, it would only make sense for Spider-Man to die well into his career after Miles Morales has experienced enough for us to actually be able to play as him. My main theory around this is that Miles will be at the level that Peter was in the first Spider-Man game, so it actually still feels like we're playing with a slightly experienced character, and then Peter is just way too advanced for us to actually play with because he would be just too overpowered. So that's kind of my theory going into it. But again, the first thing I want story-wise is definitely a Kraven the Last Hunt storyline. So the second thing I want is Harry Osborn to become Venom. I think they could easily make Eddie Brock Venom like he normally is, but I think Harry would really fit the story better. One example of this is in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. I really feel like they could have made Harry Venom instead of just a Green Goblin Part 2, and I think it really would have worked because I think Harry's such a great character because he's best friends with Peter, yet he would be his complete opposite when it comes to hero and villain side of things. I also predict Harry will be this because obviously in the end credits, we know that he's being cured by the Venom symbiote by his dad, Norman Osborn, because he's dying of the same disease that his mom did. And so depending on how long this story is, they could easily pass the symbiote around a lot. And I'll talk about this a lot later in this video because there's a few other theories that really depend on this. But my third thing that I want in Spider-Man 2 is them to introduce Gwen Stacy. If this game does take place 5 years after the first one, I think it really would work. And if we get a big chunk of this game to play as Miles, our MJ could basically be Gwen. It would work as a Miles side character, not Peter's, and this could also end up expanding the Insomniac universe because we all know we're getting Wolverine. We could honestly potentially get even more characters. We had basically a roadmap come out for the Avengers game and we saw a little snippet of Spider-Man swinging, and it was a cool little picture, and a lot of fans noticed the detail on the suit, and it looks like the Insomniac suit for Spider-Man PS4. And so if all of these things are connected, which I'll talk about hero cameos and stuff like that later in this video, but if this is all really connected, then we could have maybe a small DLC where we get to play as Gwen Stacy in her own universe, and maybe even later down the line they could introduce an Insomniac multiverse. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's honestly a really big, that's a pretty big potential in my opinion, especially if we have Miles as a big chunk of this game, and obviously Gwen could be the MJ to Miles. So the fourth thing I want from Spider-Man 2 is Yuri becoming Wraith. This game could very easily surround Peter losing those around him, and especially with that rumored 5-year jump, Yuri could have a lot of off-screen development, and she was a pretty big role in the first game, honestly pretty critical, and with her ending in the Silver Lining DLC, there's so much potential for her character. And in the comics itself, she becomes Wraith, and her storyline does involve Mr. Negative, just like it did in Spider-Man 1 PS4. But now to the fifth thing that I want in Spider-Man 2. This one is going to be more of just an overall game thing, not specifically a story thing, but it is that I want some better side missions. I think this kind of goes into the bigger open world debate that everyone's having about Spider-Man 2, and I think the structure of the activities is just so repetitive. And yes, obviously there's still a lot of fun. I go back to this game way more than I should, but I still think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I feel like they should just introduce some variety and even just smaller things like they used to have in older Spider-Man games, such as saving cats from trees, stopping super small crimes, and maybe even some more detective missions, because I like the detective missions in Spider-Man PS4 with Spider-Man himself. I didn't really like them with MJ and Miles, but I think Spider-Man's detective side, for example, the bar one in the Turf Wars DLC, that is a great and super fun mission. So I think if they have more of these detective types of missions, they'll obviously have more of a unique storyline, and they'll also play into the bigger picture. So the sixth thing I want in this game is co-op. Now, I don't think that we need a side-by-side co-op, and by that, I mean, I don't think I need to be sitting right next to my best friend to be playing the game, but I would love an online multiplayer, kind of like what the Avengers game game has, except obviously it would have to be formatted a little better because the Avengers game isn't an open world thing. Spider-Man is, but getting to play certain story missions with 2 Spider-Men would be super cool. And even some sort of side story, say about 2 hours, that you have to play with someone else no matter what. Basically a co-op game inside of the game itself. I think that's a pretty cool concept. But the 7th thing I want is more depth to the suit mods and powers. I thought Spider-Man Miles Morales did a better job with this than Spider-Man PS4, but having more options would still be nice. I feel like some suits could have abilities to wield 2 different mods or even a wider range of mods, impacting stealth, combat, and health regeneration. Also, I hope that all of the suits in Spider-Man PS4 cross over into the next game so we can start Spider-Man 2 with all of the mods, powers, and suits that we got in the last game. So the 8th thing that I want is a bigger open world. This one is actually super simple. Expand the borders past the Manhattan Bridge and let us explore more boroughs. I think at the minimum they could let us explore Queens and Brooklyn. Number 9, the 9th thing that I want is an interactive open world, kind of like GTA. Let us have full conversations with citizens. Let us walk into Avengers Tower, the Wakandan Embassy, the Sanctum Sanctora, and other things that are prominent in the MCU. Not just the MCU, but stuff that Spider-Man interacts with even in the comics. I think that just giving us that will let us immerse into the world of Spider-Man a little bit more. This could also include cameos, like I mentioned before, from other heroes. We had teases to Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Matt Murdock, Foggy Nelson, and even Jessica Jones, and even a hint to these heroes more, or phone calls to these heroes would make me happy. But now to number 10. Now this one is going to have a lot more parts because this is where I talk about the villains that I want / think will be in Spider-Man 2. There's only 2 of these that I'm going to talk about that are confirmed, and then the other 2 are just some random ones that I have thoughts on. So the first one I want is Taskmaster. I thought he was a great side villain in Spider-Man PS4, but I feel like he has so much more potential. Also, please Insomniac, give this man a redesign because I hate the design of orange and blue and white. It's just not my thing. But next up is Kraven. I already talked about the Kraven the Last Hunt storyline earlier in this video. I think this is the most obvious because he was obviously narrating the teaser trailer. And again, I explained this before. I want this Kraven storyline and I really hope they do it. Next up is Green Goblin. I feel like they set up Norman Osborn fairly well in the first game. He's already in power in New York as he is the mayor of New York. Plus, we're going to have the entire Harry Osborn storyline with Venom and him trying to be saved by his father with the symbiote. All of that stuff is going to set up Green Goblin really well. And even if we don't get Green Goblin in Spider-Man 2, I would love for him to be the big bad in Spider-Man 3 because I feel like eventually we're going to have to get a trilogy. And the final one, obviously, Venom is going to be in the movie, but I do have a little bit of a dream scenario that I want. I want Harry to become Venom. I want him to give the symbiote to Peter. I hope Peter dies in some form, or Miles has to fight Peter, which would be absolutely awesome. Imagine Miles fighting symbiote black suit Peter. That would be awesome in my opinion. Then obviously Harry gets the symbiote back by the end. Spider-Man and Venom fight, and then Peter takes the symbiote. Harry goes to jail. The post-credit scene would tease Carnage, and Venom and Spider-Man could team up in the 3rd game to fight Carnage. I think that last part with Carnage is getting a little bit ambitious, but I feel like the storyline for Venom is kind of reasonable, and I hope to think that I'm right, and I'm praying for it. But overall, I'm still super hyped for this game. Let me know a few things that you guys would want in Spider-Man 2 in the comments down below. Also, let me know some of your villain predictions in the comments down below, just like I gave you guys in this video. If you guys want more Insomniac Spider-Man 2 content, let me know by dropping a like rating on this video, and I'll make sure to do more because I absolutely love the first game, and I cannot wait for the second game. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.